Right, I'm making good progress. Protocol's gone out the window a bit here. We were supposed to be carefully surveying and risk assessing everything before we so much as step foot on the surface, but who knows what dangers could be here. But now I'm scrambling down this rock face, throwing caution to the wind. I simply don't have time to pussyfoot around here. Things seem a bit too quiet though. This place is so desolate. Nothing more than some hardy looking plant life dotted around the place. The structure's coming up closer now, and I've got to say my optimism is waning. I can't see any forms of civilization here, no sounds of hustle and bustle. Just the same dead, empty landscape and the sound of the gently blowing breeze. I can see what it is I've been walking towards in a bit more detail now. There is a group of 4 small square dark buildings at equal distance to each other, with a taller tower in the middle of them. This doesn't feel right. If this is a settlement, it's a very small one. And where are the inhabitants? Right, I'm standing in front of the structures now. They are perfect cubes of about 3 meters on each side of some kind of very dark, shiny stone. They sit about 10 meters apart from each other to form a square. In the middle is a pillar, maybe about 10 meters tall, that tapers to a point, and is made of the same material. On the corner of all of these structures, including the tip of the central pillar, there's a bright blue light, although how they're being powered is anyone's guess at the moment. Let's see, there's small openings on the sides of each of the cubes. Quick peek inside shows, yeah, completely hollow and empty. The light's fading, so I guess one of these will make a decent shelter for the night at least. I managed to salvage a simple firelighting kit from the wreckage, and some of this plant life I've been seeing looks burnable. Time to get settled down. Okay, a few hours later, it's dark now. Well, darker. The aurora in the sky is still shining away. Hasn't dropped in intensity as long as I've been watching it. Fire's burning steadily, and I have one of the few survival rations, which was appetizing. Need to start making a plan for tomorrow. I guess if I can make my way up the... What was that? I think I saw a shadow in the... Oh, my head. What happened? Where am I? Looks like I'm in a tent of some kind. I'm not sure what whacked me, but the fact I'm still alive tells me they don't want me dead. Or yet at least. I'm lying on a form of bed. Simple raised platform, but there isn't much else in here. No use sitting around. I can hear a huge amount of activity coming from outside, and I'm guessing it's whoever or whatever put me in here. Here goes. Okay. Well, I'm not far from those 4 square buildings I was originally sitting at, but now they're a hive of activity. They're moving large amounts of some form of rock into the buildings through the openings on each one, and the central pillar is now shining brightly. There's a column of light shooting from its point high into the sky. And all around me there are tents similar to the ones I've just walked out of. Hundreds, thousands of them. It's like an entire city's sprung up overnight. Now I've got a good view of my assailants. They're vaguely humanoid with a pale green tint to their leathery skin. They have solid black eyes above menacing toothed, beaks. Their upper bodies seem, on the whole, very densely packed with muscle, like a gorilla on Earth, but their legs are backwards jointed like a cat. I think it's time to... Oh, sugar. Hold on, no need to be rough. I'm coming. Right, where to begin? Well, that was an interesting day. I've finally been left in what I presume to be my tent to sleep for the night. I was bundled under one of the arms of a particularly brutish individual and hurried along to a particularly large tent where I was presented to who I can only presume are the leaders of the settlement. Or were they being presented to me? I couldn't be sure. 3 individuals, all in matching clothing that had a more regal look about it, sat before me. The slightly rotund one in the middle excitedly moved his chair closer to attempt some form of communication with me. Lots of words were repeated in their native language slowly and deliberately with various gestures and actions, occasionally being cut off from noises from the crowd that were slowly gathering around us. Were they protesting to whatever was being said or cheering in agreement? For all I know, they just had uncontrollable tics. The impression I was left with, though, was that their attempts to communicate with me were controversial, and perhaps there were some around that would sooner see me gone from their settlement. I showed willing by reciprocating with slow and deliberate "hello," and I thought, to hell with it, "I come in peace," followed by attempting to reproduce some of the less complex words they were speaking to me. "Nikchag" and "chiklem," which resulted in an uproar of noise, which I assume was laughter. After the noise had died down, the central leader stood up, seemed to hush the crowd and paused for dramatic effect before gargling, I couldn't help but smirk and had to stifle a laugh from hearing his attempts at mimicking me, although I'm not entirely sure if it was just nervous laughter. Suddenly, as if satisfied at the conclusion of our conversation we just had, the rotund leader issued some form of command, and I was once again bundled under an arm and carted outside before being thrust in front of another individual. This guy seemed meeker and more quietly spoken than the others, and beckoned me to follow him while he pointed out various tents and presumably told me all about the purpose of each one, but who knows, he could have been reciting Kylie Minogue lyrics for all I knew. The brutish fellow, whose armpits I had become so acquainted with, followed not far behind at all times, occasionally moving up ahead a few steps to push back curious passers-by. This wholly insightful tour of the settlement did at least give me a sense of the scale of the place. I could start to piece some things together. Firstly, the place is huge. There were tents stretching out as far as I could see, and throughout the settlement it looked like everyone was busy in setting things up. Tents and other temporary structures, and all were being connected one by one to the dark square buildings at the centre via long cables trailing along the ground that were then covered over with a layer of sand and gravel and dirt. It was obvious that this central pillar was providing some form of energy to the tents. Every tent that had been connected had lights and gizmos, and most had a red glowing orb in the centre that I presume was a form of heating. My new meek friend seemed to take a particular interest in the central power generator, pointing vigorously at the 4 square buildings and then to the central pillar and then up to the sky, all the while explaining in extreme detail exactly how it worked, giving technical data about its power output, flow rates, recharge cycles and so on. Or at least that would be my best guess. He seemed to catch himself and realise I couldn't understand a word he was saying, so he kneeled down, drew a circle on the sand at his feet and pointed at the power generator and said, "Klankoff." Then went on to draw several more circles, seemingly making rough measurements by eye before connecting each circle to another with a line. He then pointed at one of the other circles and said a word very slowly for me to have a chance to repeat him. "Charkam. Charkam." Once happy that my pronunciation was close enough, he pointed at a point on the horizon and then went back to each of the other circles, repeating the same pattern. Jirem, Paknik, Chinkatkov, and so on. I soon understood that he was showing me locations of other settlements and took the lines between each circle to represent some kind of migratory pattern. My best guess is that these are nomadic people and periodically up sticks and move their entire city between all of these locations, although I'm not exactly sure why yet. The rest of the day went on in this vein. I was shown various tools used for farming, herding and hunting. The livestock is kept towards the outer edge of the settlement and mostly comprised of a large, slow-moving species with thick, dark fur, but with a skeletal structure more reptilian than mammalian to my eyes. As friendly and welcoming as these people seem, I couldn't help but notice the amount of friction that my presence seemed to cause for some of the people we passed. Quite a few times we were stopped by passers-by shouting at my meek friend and gesturing at me, whilst being ushered away by the brutish fellow, of course. My meek friend would shout something back submissively, pointing the direction that we had come from, and in a way to say, "Take it up with the boss." I was then shown what I presumed to be a hunting weapon, a form of spear, although it it was only demonstrated on a small bush, I could see its effectiveness as the bush burst into flames. It seems to work by arcing electricity between two plates fitted into the head of the spear, which would immobilise even large prey. By the time we made it back to the centre of the city, it was dark outside and I was shown into this tent where I am now. I've been left to my own devices, although another brutish fellow is standing just outside the door, so I guess I'm not going anywhere. I've been given a meal which I believe is the meat from one of the large fluffy lizards that I saw earlier on, with some form of root crop. Some kind of cross between a chicken and toothpaste. I'm sure it's an acquired taste. I can hear an argument going on not far from the tent. Pretty sure one of the voices is that of one of the leaders that I met earlier on in the day. Peeking through the door to the tent, I can see, yes, it is indeed him, in some kind of heated debate with one of the other leaders. The pair seem to be pointing and gesturing over at my tent, and okay, I'm not sure I like the look of that. The second leader just thrust one of the spear-like hunting weapons into the hands of the first, who then threw it down onto the ground and stormed off. Great. I guess now it's time to try and get some sleep. I think that's going to happen. Okay, so it's the next morning. No assailants in the night at least, but at first light I was bundled out of my tent in that same dignified manner from my brutish friend, and I'm becoming so accustomed to. I was plopped down in front of the leaders that I met yesterday, and one of them was holding that spear that he'd thrown down to the ground the previous night. Flanking them on both sides were two brutish fellows in armour. The central rotund leader gave me some kind of speech, but his voice seemed far more ceremonial and solemn than before. He finished by beckoning over one of the brutish fellows and passing the spear to him before giving me a look in the eye and turning to leave with the others. I was then ushered through the city by three of these brutes, one armed with a spear. We're now past the outskirts of the city and are roughly following the edge of the mountains that I first crash-landed into. We don't seem to be slowing down at all, so I guess we're going a fair way into the wilderness. I guess this is it. We're going to a quiet, secluded spot for a nice morning execution. I'm done for. Right, good news, bad news. Good news is I haven't been executed yet. We came up to the entrance of a large cave in the side of the mountains. I thought, well, this is it, end of the line. I turned to face my executioner as he was reciting my last rites, and then, after he was finished speaking, he put the spear into my hands, spun me round and shoved me towards the entrance of the cave. I looked back in confusion, but all three of the brutes impatiently waved towards the cave and blocked any route for me to back out through. So this is the bad news. I have a feeling that whatever is inside this cave could be a lot worse than a spear to the neck. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to support me and the channel, then leave a like, leave a comment and consider subscribing if you haven't already. It really does help out a lot. Visit www.carriejacobsart.com where you can find my prints, my t-shirts and my Star Stuff art kits, all for sale. And of course you can follow me on Facebook and Instagram at carriejacobsart. Cheerio.